So this morning you got a handout with your assignments for this school week for you starting today. So we took a quick subtracting integers quick check quiz. Most of you did really well on that. Good job. I could tell you were doing your at-home work. And that really helps when you do the work that you are supposed to do at home. It helps you keep up. Today we're going to take some notes on multiplying and dividing integers. And then we're going to work on a skills practice on multiplying integers. Tomorrow you will have a skills practice on dividing integers. So at home on Monday, you will have a Google activity in your Google Classroom. It's a Google Slides activity, so there won't be anything for you to take home. You'll just on Monday check your Google Classroom and you'll see the assignment there. Let's look at the back. Tuesday, your assignment will also be in Google Classroom. It's a Google Classroom task cards activity, and you just submit it right there in Google Classroom on Tuesday. And no, that should say Wednesday. I thought I got everything. I thought I double checked it. That should say Wednesday. I have the date right, but I have the day wrong. Wednesday. Wednesday you will have a study guide, a paper study guide for a test that you're going to take next week. We are at the end of our unit. So you'll do the study guide at home on Wednesday. You'll come to school on Thursday. We'll review it, and then we'll take the test on Friday. And then the following week we have fall break. So you don't have any schoolwork at home, or you don't come to school the following week. So that gets us done with this unit right before we leave for a week off. Okay? Yes? Sure. You sure can. Any other questions? All right, so let's put this into the front pocket of your math notebook right now. So get your math notebook or folder or whatever you call it out and put this in the front pocket. That way we all have ours in the same place and there's no questions about it. And then let's look at this multiply and divide integers page. I just handed you this page and that stack of papers, so you should have that somewhere. All right, so we've learned to add and subtract integers. Now we're going to look at the rules for multiplying and dividing integers. When you multiply and divide positive and negative numbers, you multiply and divide as usual. That means you just do the same multiplication and division as you normally do. So this needs to say as usual, and this blank. As usual. The rule is, if the signs are the same, the answer is positive. That means if you have two factors that you're multiplying together and they're both positive, your answer is positive. Or if both factors are negative, your answer is positive. Is that different from our rules when we're adding? If they're both negative, are we going to get a positive answer when we're adding? -5 plus -3, that's what? If we're adding -5 plus -3. What is it, Elijah? It's -8, right? You have 3 negatives, you add 5 more negatives to it, you still have 8 negatives. But if we have -5 times -3, we're going to get a positive 15. So the answer is positive. If the signs are different, the answer will be, what do you think? Negative. If you have two factors and they have different signs, then your product or your answer is going to be negative. All right, so let's try some of those. -3 times 12. 3 times 12 is 36. Are the signs the same or different? They're different, so our answer is going to be negative 36. So we're going to multiply as usual. 4 times 8 is 32. The signs are different, so our product is negative. Multiply as usual. 2 times 5 is 10. The signs are the same, so our product is positive. 6 times 13. I don't know that one off the top of my head, although someone in first block on Monday did. But I'm going to do 13 times 6. So sometimes when you're doing this, you're going to have to do the standard multiplication algorithm. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 78. The signs are different, so my product is negative. What does product mean? You have to know that for your test next week. What does product mean? Raise your hand if you can tell me what product means. It's the answer to what kind of problem? Taylor? Multiplication. What does sum mean? Elijah? Yes, it's the answer to an addition problem. So you have to know the difference between those two on your test next week. All right. Let's look at some division. We're going to divide as usual and then worry about the sign. So 42 divided by 7 is 6. The signs are different. So my quotient, that's the answer to a division problem. My quotient is positive or negative? Negative. Very good. Negative 36 divided by negative 3 is 12. The signs are the same, so my quotient is positive. Very good. What kind of problem is this when it looks like a fraction? It's also division, right? It's the same as this. Do you see where they get this and this from? So the 64 would be like that dot divided by that 8. If that helps you think about it as division, that literally comes from a number divided by a number. That's the division sign. Okay, 64 divided by 8 is 8. And they're both negative, so my quotient is positive. And last one, 12 divided by negative 4. Well, that's 3. The signs are different, so my quotient is negative. Easy enough? So the thing that I'm going to caution you about is multiplication and division are normally much easier for people when they're positives and negatives because the rule is pretty easy. If the signs are the same, it's positive. If they're different, it's negative. What you're going to start to have trouble with, or you may have trouble with, is when you go back to adding integers, not using this same rule, right? When we add integers, we get the sign from the add-in with the greatest what? Absolute value, right? The number that looks bigger. That's how we decide on the sign. With multiplying and dividing, it's if the signs are the same or if the signs are different. So they're different rules, so you really have to know your rules really well. All right, any questions up here? We will give you, if you are not great with your multiplication facts, we will give you a multiplication chart today, and we'll just tape it right in your notebook because we don't want you worrying about the actual multiplication or division facts. We want you to learn the rules. Okay, so let's go down here to this bottom left, and let's look at this section to help us make some sense of it. Okay, solve. Negative 2 times negative 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. Negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, so we're good. Well, now we're going to think about if there are 3 factors. So 2 times 2 is 4, just like up here, and then 4 times 2 is 8. Now, here we've got to worry about, now we have 3 negatives. Well, a negative times a negative is a positive, so I got a positive 4. Positive 4 times negative 2. So the signs are different now, so our product has to be negative. Did that make sense? A negative times a negative, I got a positive. And then this positive times a negative now gives me a negative product. Everybody good with that? Okay, so let's see when we add one more factor. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. Now, do you think it's going to be positive or negative? Well, a negative times a negative is a positive. A positive times this negative is a negative, right? This is where we were with negative 8. Negative 8 times a negative 2, so a negative times a negative is a positive, so it's a positive 16. All right, let's add one more negative 2 as a factor. So 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. And 16 times 2 is 32. Now let's deal with those negatives. A negative times a negative is a positive. A negative times a negative, or a positive times a negative is a negative. A negative times a negative is a positive, right? This is where we were up here. We were at positive 16. And then positive times a negative is a negative. Do you see a pattern that has developed at all? So other than positive, negative, I'm talking about a pattern here. So I feel like if there's an even number of negatives, not an even number of factors, but an even number of negatives, they're going to make a positive, right? So a negative times a negative is a positive. Well, this negative and negative here make a positive, but when I add this third one on, a positive times a negative is a negative. Here, these two negatives make a positive, and these two negatives make a positive, and then a positive times a positive is a positive. And then when we get down here, multiply this pair, you get a positive, multiply this pair, and you get a positive. But when you get this odd number out, a positive times a negative is a negative, right? So do you see a pattern? So even numbers, you know even numbers, right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Even numbers, when you have a pair, you're going to get a positive. But if you have an odd number of negatives, you're going to get a negative. 3, 5, what else? What's another odd number besides 3 and 5? Anybody know odd numbers? You know even numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8. So 7, if you had 7 negatives, you would get a negative answer, right? So what we're going to write here, I'm not going to rewrite it. It was written. I guess I will. When there is an even number of negative factors, the product is positive. Make that bigger. When there is an even number of negative factors, the product is positive. When there is an odd number, that's a number sign, the product is negative. Anybody still writing? Okay. All right, so let's go up here and let's evaluate. Let's use some substitution. So we're going to evaluate if A equals 2, B equals -3, C equals 8. So what does this mean when this -7 is right next to this A? So A is 2. Does that mean -72? What does it mean when there is this is called a coefficient. This -7 is the coefficient next to a variable. What does it mean when you have a number or a coefficient right next to a variable? What's the operation? Caleb? Yeah, it means to multiply, right? It's times. So let's rewrite it. -7 times 2. And then we're going to multiply that by 4 times B. And so 4 times, since it's already in parentheses, I don't want to use parentheses again, so I'll use the dot for times. Times B is -3. So you have to show your substitution first. And then order of operations says to do what's inside the parentheses first. So I have a parentheses here, but there's no math inside of it to do. So we have parentheses here. Is there math to do inside of that? Yes, so we're going to go here first. 4 times -3. What's 4 times -3? -12. Rewrite the problem and change the 4 times -3 to a -12. And then the commutative property says I can multiply in any order, but this one I'm just going to work left to right because I don't think if I did the 2 times -12, I don't think that's going to help me because that gives me 24, and I don't know 24 off the times -7 off the top of my head. So I'm just going to work left to right. -7 times 2 is -14, and so then we're left with -14 times -12. So I'm going to have to do the standard algorithm. 14 times 12. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 1 is 2. 0 placeholder. 1 times 4 is 4. And 1 times 1 is 1. And then I add. And I get 168. Is it going to be positive or negative? So the factors are both negative. They're the same. So my product has to be, Mackenzie, positive. Very good. Questions? All right, let's look at this. B to the third power, B cubed. And so what does to the third power mean? What does cubed mean? Does it mean multiply something by 3? No, remember this 3 means to multiply the base by itself 3 times. And so B is -3. So we're going to call that -3 to the third power. And let's put that in parentheses, -3 to the third power. So that means -3 times negative 3 times negative 3. So 3 times 3 is 9, and a negative times a negative is a positive, so I have a positive 9, and then a positive 9 times a negative 3. 3 times 9 is 27. The signs are different, so my product is negative. Let me see if I can split this a little bit, make it a little bit easier to see. All right, everybody good so far? Okay, now we have 3 times A times C divided by B. So I'm going to rewrite it so that it looks like this because this is the proper form. So when I do substitution, I'm going to write, when it says divided by B, I'm going to put the B in the bottom. So 3 times A is 2, and C is what number? Look up at the top. What number is the C? 8. And then we're going to divide that by B, and what is B? Negative 3. So when you have problems set up like this, you do the top, you do the bottom, and then you do the dividing. So let's do the top. 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 times 8 is 48. 48 divided by negative 3 is 16. Is it going to be positive 16 or negative 16? Negative 16, right? This one's positive, and that one's negative, so negative 16. Oh, these are super fun, aren't they? Super fun. All right, here we go. A times B times C divided by 2 times A. So, A is what number? A is 2 times, what's B? I'm not going to use that dot. I'm going to change it like that. Negative 3 times, and what's C? 8 divided by 2 times, and what's A again? 2. Two times negative 3 is negative 6. Negative 6 times 8 is a negative 48 divided by, and what's 2 times 2? 4. And now we do the division. Negative 48 divided by 4 is negative 12, right? Everybody good with those? So we're going to try some on the skills practice. When you get done with your skills practice, before you leave, I want you to put both this sheet and the skills practice, when you're done with it, I want you to put them in the prongs of your notebook. Not right now because you need to use them, but I want them put in there before you leave. All right, let's look at the skills practice. Put your notes to the side. You might want to use those while you're working. All right, let's start with problem number 1. Negative 4 times 6. Raise your hand if you can tell me the answer to negative 4 times 6, including if the product is positive or negative. So I can't tell if we're still asleep, we don't want to answer, or we don't know. Negative 4 times 6. What do you think, Elijah? Negative 24, right? Well, 6 times 4 is 24. And then a negative times a positive is a negative. All right. Look at number 2. Negative 2 times negative 8. Raise your hand if you can tell me the product for problem number 2. Somebody besides Elijah. Mackenzie. It is 16, right? It's positive 16. Look at problems number 6 and 7 and look and see if you think those are the same problem. 6 and 7. We're going to compare these two. Do those look like the same problem, Mackenzie? No, they look similar, right? But they're not the same. You don't solve them the same, okay? Number 6 says we're squaring 5. And remember, the negative in front of it can mean the opposite. So we're looking for the opposite of 5 squared. Well, what is 5 squared? Well, 5 squared means 5 times 5, and we get, what's 5 times 5? 25. What's the opposite of 25? Negative 25. Or you can think about it as we're squaring that, and then we just bring that negative over. It's negative 25. Number 7 means we're squaring what number? Negative 5. The negative's inside with it. So negative 5 times negative 5. What is negative 5 times negative 5? Positive 25, right? So although they look the same, you have to pay attention to where the negative is. Is it inside or is it inside or is it outside? Do you see the difference between those two problems? Okay. All right. Let's look at problem 17. Do you think that one's going to be positive or negative? Remember, we looked at if there's an even number or odd number of negatives. What do you think, Mackenzie? So remember, a negative times a negative is going to make a what? A positive. And then we have a positive times a positive, so we're going to get a positive answer, right? So then we can just work left to right, or I could start here if I wanted. But let's work left to right. 5 times 3 is 15. And 15 times 4 is 60. Let's look at 24. So there's 2 different operations that I have to do here. What are they? Well, multiply right here, right? The negative 2 and the negative 3. But also, I need to square the negative 3. What comes first in order of operations? Exponents or multiplying? Mackenzie? Exponents, right? Parentheses. Well, you do have parentheses, but there's nothing to do inside of it. So then the next thing is exponents. So we're squaring. Are we squaring 3 or are we squaring negative 3? We're squaring negative 3. So that means negative 2 times negative 3 times negative 3. And we have to do this part first because that's the squaring. That's what this means. So negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. And negative 2 times 9 is it's 18, but is it positive or negative? Negative 18. So I feel like maybe we're getting the idea of the positives and negatives, but maybe we're a little rusty on our multiplication tables. That's the feeling I get. Okay, let's turn it over and let's look at the back. We'll do one word problem and then you're going to get a chance to work on these yourself. Diving. We're going to try number 2. A deep sea diver descends below the surface of the water at a rate of 60 feet per minute. What is the depth of the diver after 10 minutes? So we've got to first decide if we've got some positives or negatives here. Is that 60 going to be positive or negative? What do you think, Mackenzie? It's negative 60. How did you know that? Yes, he descends. That means negative. That means going in the downward direction. And below the surface of the water also is another indication. So negative 60. And for 10 minutes. So time is positive. And what kind of problem is this? Is this multiplication or division? So I want you to think multiplication is repeated addition, right? So if I think about it, they're going down 60 feet per minute for 10 minutes. So 60 1 minute, 60 another, 60 another, 60 another, 60 another, 10 times. So that's a multiplication problem, right? Negative 60, that's the 60 feet we're descending, times 10 minutes, because it's 60 feet per minute. And mental math, what's 6 times 1? 6. And then how many zeros do I move over? 1 here and 1 here, so that's 2. And is this going to be a positive answer or a negative answer? Mackenzie? Negative, right? We didn't go underwater 60 feet per minute 10 times and then land up in the air, right? So this is a negative. Now we have to go back and answer the question. What is the depth of the diver after 10 minutes? How would you say that? What's the depth of the diver after 10 minutes? We could say that he is 600 feet below the surface. So the depth of the diver is, you could say, negative 600 feet or 600 feet below the surface of the water. I want you to write that entire thing. I know that seems like it's repeating it, but I want you to see that you can either say the depth of the diver is negative 600 feet, or that also means 600 feet below the surface of the water, because it's this keyword that also means negative, right? That's how you can write that. All right, when you get done writing that, I want you to start working on this on your own. We want you to start on the other side. Guys, in math class, I have people that always want to go straight to the hardest problems first. They're like, I want to get those out of the way. Let me tell you, math class is built where the problems are spiraling so that you get better before you get to the harder problems. You start with the easier problems because that builds your mathematical ability before you get to the harder problems. Because what happens is if you skip to the harder problems, a lot of people miss those because they have not done the problems to get ready for that. All right? It's like if you're weightlifting, would you go straight to trying to lift 300 pounds? Or do you need to start with lighter weights first? You've got to start with the easier stuff first. All right, we want to see when you get to right here, problem number 8, we want to see the work that you've done up here at the top first before you keep going. If you need a multiplication chart, Mrs. Bent, do you still have some of those? Okay. And the tape. So if you need a multiplication chart, even if you're like, I don't think I need it. The multiplication chart is a 15 times 15, not a 12 times 12. So it's got some bigger numbers on there. So if you feel like you might want it one day, just go ahead and go get it. Take your folder up to Mrs. Bent. Use your math tools that you're allowed to use.